We are way overdue for a UVA basketball podcast. Chris Graham here, Augusta Free Press. Sometimes I think I got to find somebody to help me produce these things because not only do I record them, produce the content that leads to the recording and then record them, but then I have to, then I actually have to produce them in terms of, the rigmarole. Um, that's another problem for another day. We're going to cover a lot in this one, and also for uh, making it easy if you want to pick and choose what you want to get out. If you're listening to the podcast, you're getting everything. If you, we can, we're also going to do. I'm also going to put together some individual videos out of this so that you can kind of pick and choose the parts you want to get into. We're going to cover though the coach search, the latest there. So much is developing on that. But I'm going to start with where we are, the current season. And there's two parts to this, the story of UVA basketball right now. There's the ongoing basketball season, and then there's the coach search. I am not recording. You can tell I got the regular background. I'm not recording from Charlotte. I did not. I decided not to make the trip this year because I think the bigger story of UVA basketball is the coach search, and I don't need to, drive 5 hours to Charlotte and put up money for a really good hotel in uptown Charlotte to be there for a day or two, and get the story of UVA basketball. I'm not cheap. It's also going to be 75 degrees here in Virginia this week and kind of want to enjoy enjoy the weather here in Virginia. We had a long, hard winter, felt like to me. Okay. So we're going to start with preparing, though, getting you ready for UVA Georgia Tech. And we'll start with how a lot went right for UVA in the 75-61 win over Georgia Tech. And I'm still surprised. When I cover the ACC season, I focus on UVA because I mean, at Augusta Free Press, I'm a news writer, I'm the editor, bottle washer, whatever else. And so, I don't watch a lot of college basketball outside of the UVA sphere. I don't watch a lot of college football outside the UVA sphere, um, because you got to prioritize. But what I do keep up with the teams as UVA is getting ready to play them on the schedule, learn as much as I can about them going into that game. Then afterwards, I just don't honestly don't pay a lot of attention to them. So then when I look up and see that Georgia Tech had 10 wins in the conference this year and finished eighth. I'm shocked because the only time I saw them, they were getting pummeled by at the time not very good Virginia team. 75-61 was the final. Virginia controlled that one, got the lead in the double digits early in the second half and kept it there. Never really threatened in that one. Virginia shot 49.2%, was 11 of 27 from three, 34 points in the paint, 14 makes at the rim, controlled the boards, 25-6 advantage when Georgia Tech missed a shot. Virginia had 13 offensive boards. McNeely had 20, Data Ames 18, Andrew Rohde 11 points, 9 assists, Blake Buchanan 11 rebounds. I mean, this was about as good as Virginia played all year. I mean, the win at Wake and this one, in terms of just pure basketball, this may have been the best pure basketball effort we saw from Virginia this year. So, say all that. That's the only time these two teams played. And we start at 0-0 tomorrow, shortly after noon. ESPN has the game, and it's the 8-9 game. So it's the only game on Wednesday in the ACC tournament where the teams aren't fed in from Tuesday. There are three games today. I'm recording this at around 12:15, starting to record around 12:15. I think the first game's at 3 today. Um, my experience, and I'll just share, I am missing not being in Charlotte. Um, Admittedly, even and it was my decision. It wasn't a money decision or anything else, to say the least. This is one of my favorite times of the year. It's just, I got to go where the story is. I feel like, and it's not down there. But okay, ACC tournament. There's three games on Tuesday. The winners play in the second, third, and fourth games tomorrow. And so the teams who are seeded, what would that be? I guess the second game tomorrow would be the uh, five seed Carolina would get the 12-13 winner, and then the night games would have the 10-15 winner, and then the 11-14 winner. There are three teams sitting there waiting, and they're playing a team that played the day before, and you don't play a lot of games on back-to-back days in the regular season. So the legs are an issue for the teams that win today and then have to play tomorrow. The 8-9 game, they're both fresh. It's the only game tomorrow where you have two fresh teams. And in fact, it's, aside from today's games, the only other game in the tournament where you have, two teams that are on equal legs, so to speak. Um, it's also tomorrow is an exhausting day for the writers. Just giving you that insight. I mean, not everybody. When I cover ACC tournaments, I try to be there for every game. I mean, I don't try to be there. I'm there for every game. Um, because I grew up an ACC kid. Back when the tournament started on Friday. And when you were in elementary school, you snuck a transistor radio into school and tried to turn it down as low as you could so you could still hear it without the teacher hearing it. Unless you were lucky enough to have a teacher who was also an ACC basketball fan, which for me, fortunately, was the case in sixth and seventh grade. And they just roll one of those big TVs in on those trays. I say big TVs; they were probably 19-inch TVs, but they were on those huge trays. And then you have the game on, the 12 o'clock game and the 2 o'clock game on until school let out. All that was going on back in the days. The ACC tournament is just like it's something I grew up with, and it's something that's always special to me. And so I'm there every game. So the first day is 3 games, the second day is 4 games, the third day is 4 games now. It's just ridiculous. The conference has gotten so big. By the end of the 11th game on Thursday, I mean, I'm always just like just practically dead. And then Friday they don't have a game until night now, the way they do it. So at least you get to sleep in. And I would try to write a story about every game. I mean, I got my money's worth, or at least one story. I'd write a game story and a column about every game. Got my money's worth. But okay, so anyway, all that saying, I wish I was there aside. The weather in Charlotte's going to be nice this week too, and I wouldn't have even known it because I'd be inside all day. I'd get a run in the morning, but yeah, I'd be inside the rest of the day. All right, so um, before February 8th, getting back to UVA Georgia Tech, which is what I'm supposed to be talking about here. Before the February 8th game in Charlottesville, the one that Virginia won pretty handily, um, after I should say, after that game, Georgia Tech won 5 of their next 6. So on paper, had been playing really well. And then they got blown out at Wake Forest in the regular season finale on Saturday. Now, to be fair, Georgia Tech had won 5 of 6, but they hadn't really beaten anybody. This year's ACC is not strong top to bottom. It's not really strong even middle to bottom. There's a few teams at the top that are, I mean, obviously Duke and Clemson are in Louisville, obviously Louisville. I forget how quickly Louisville turned things around. Those three teams are really good teams, and then there's a big drop off. Wake is the 4 seed, and Wake's not going to make the NCAA tournament. Carolina might, as the 5 seed, make the NCAA tournament. Might is all we get. We might get 3 teams in this year. You get down to the druthers, and that's what Georgia Tech was beating up on. They were either beating up on teams playing today in the ACC tournament, or they had 2 wins in that 5 of 6 stretch over NC State and Miami, who aren't even in the tournament. The tournament's so big that everybody even gets in the tournament, which is stupid too. Um, so they had a bad loss to a team. Wake Forest had lost 3 of 4 going into last Saturday's game, where they just completely and utterly dominated Georgia Tech really from the get-go. Virginia also coming off a bad a 84-70 loss at Syracuse that won 13 games this year total, 7 in the ACC. Hadn't been playing well all season long, and then made them look like the second coming of Pearl Washington, Derek Coleman, and Carmelo Anthony out there Saturday night. I'll still call it the Carrier Dome. I don't care what they call it up there. So 2 teams coming in who had been playing relatively well, played awful. One of these teams has to win. The team that has to win has to play Duke on Thursday. They get fed to the top seed. I wrote in my column, and I shouldn't be so negative. It's a chance. I mean, they play the games for a reason. You don't just run computer simulations. You play the game and see what happens. And, one of these two will get the chance to advance and shock the world. maybe. I mean, that's they get to be a team for one more day. They stave off the exit interviews. They, delay the transfer portal season for them for another day. That's what it is. For Ron Sanchez, it also is, a chance to extend his coaching tenure for one more day. His tenure as the head coach will come to an end whenever Virginia loses. He's not on the short list of candidates. We'll talk about that later. You can say Sanchez was dealt a bad hand, and he was dealt that bad hand, but that doesn't change the situation with the coaching search. He's not on the list to be the next head coach. Things just aren't working out for him, unfortunately. But that's for tomorrow or another day. Hopefully, push it down the road, right? In the here and now, he's the coach, and he and his staff have to come up with a game plan to try to beat Georgia Tech. He was asked about this. Actually, one of our colleagues, Jerry Ratcliffe, on the UVA Zoom call on Monday, asked, "All right, so you got game tape. They got game tape on you from the February 8th game. What happens now? You got adjustments to make." And what Sanchez said is there aren't a lot of surprises. And, I'm kind of paraphrasing here now. I got the quotes in the story that I wrote on this. But, from Damon Stoudemire's standpoint at Georgia Tech, from Ron Sanchez's standpoint at Virginia, at this stage of a season, I mean, we're in March now. You started practice in October. You've been playing since early November. You don't make drastic changes. You don't change your offensive philosophy or defensive philosophy. Maybe you run a new play. Maybe throw a junk defense in just out of a timeout. Talk about that in a minute. But by and large, you don't change what you do. You just try to do what you do better, and be more effective and efficient at it. And so, yeah, there's not X's and O's tweaks here as far as that goes. Now, from Virginia's standpoint, Sanchez has injected something a little different, not a little different, actually radically different. The pack line defense hasn't been working for this group this year. I wrote a column actually last week. I wrote after the Clemson game in my one of my notes columns about how a certain UVA basketball legend had recommended to us post game after the Clemson loss. Hey, why not try some zone? In that game, Clemson was running the pick and roll and killing the bigs, killing UVA's bigs on the pick and roll. Well, one thing you're not going to do against the zone is kill you with a pick and roll. Why not try that when you're getting beat like a drum on the inside? And I asked Sanchez about that last Monday, and he said, we're good with what we got in terms of our defensive approach." And then on Tuesday, he did try a 2-3 zone for one possession coming out of timeout. Didn't work, led to an open three-pointer for Florida State, but he tried something different. Then on Saturday night at Syracuse was also killing Virginia in the post. I mean, awfully. I mean, that in the first half. When before we tried this new junk defense in the second half, the 1-3-1 zone, Syracuse was just scoring at will on the post. So he rolls out the 1-3-1 zone, and actually it worked. Syracuse got a couple of jump shots out of it, but also I think it was three turnovers at least on forced passes into the post that just didn't work out. And so, it's something. Sanchez said yesterday, he was asked about this by Greg Medea, my seatmate, when we flew out to the World Series last year in Omaha. Um, and so Greg asked the question, and Ron tried to say, he said we had it in our back pocket for a bit and pulled it out here and there. Yeah, no, fact check. They hadn't used the 1-3-1 zone this year. They tried a 2-3 zone a couple of times against Virginia Tech, and they used it for one possession against Florida State, but no 1-3-1s. Um, and it looked, like I said, it looked good, and he thought it looked good too. So, it's not like he's going to use it for the whole game, if he would use it against Georgia Tech. But it is something that Damon Stoudemire and his staff are going to have to spend some time on now, because now you've got UVA on tape using a 2-3 zone. The 2-3 wasn't in either the Virginia Tech or the Florida State games. The 2-3 zone was it looked like what you get your kids to do in a YMCA league. They didn't play it very well. The 1-3-1 though, I thought they played that pretty well. They extended it out, uh, and really it did take Syracuse out of its offensive flow there for a while. So we'll see. I mean, if nothing else, again, Stoudemire has to, um, you know, spend a little bit of time preparing zone beaters for those two. and he has to be thinking every time they go to a media timeout that Sanchez might come back out with that, and so make them waste some of their time doing something that we may not use. All right, the forecast for this one is interesting. I for my pregame analyses. I use Ken Palm, Bart Torvik, Evan Maya, Haslam Metrics, and ESPN BPI to help give everybody a feel for what the computers say about a game. This one, the five have, let's see, three have Virginia winning by a point. Ken Palm has Georgia Tech winning by a point. ESPN's BPI has Georgia Tech a 0.2 point favorite. So, and the score range is remarkably consistent. I guess algorithms have to, they'll bunch things up here. There's no outlier here. ESPN's BPI does not give a predicted score. It just gives you the margin. The other four have this game. Let's see, Bart Torvik and Haslam Metrics has Virginia winning 67-66. Ken Palm has Georgia Tech winning 68-67, and Evan Maya has Virginia winning 66-65. That's pretty consistent as far as the computers are weighing in on this. So, okay, so next up, we're going to get into that coaching search news, and there's a lot to unwrap as far as that goes. So after this break, we're gonna dive in. All right, we're back, and we just talked. If you're watching the videos and you're not listening to the whole podcast, we just talked about the UVA Georgia Tech game, noon tip on Wednesday, ACC tournament, and now we're getting into the other story. I said in the first segment that there's two stories to this UVA basketball season. There's the story of the season and how it plays out, and then there's the coaching search. Tony Bennett retired on October 18th, and here we are nearly 5 months later, and we're trying to figure out who the next coach is going to be. And it's interesting. So Virginia's job's been open since October 18th. Let's see. Jim Larinaga stepped down at Miami in December, sometime before Christmas. Miami's already got its new coach, Duke assistant Jai Lucas, excuse me. Um, Florida State, Leonard Hamilton announced, I believe it was in January, but it could have been late January, early February. In any case, Leonard Hamilton announced that he was stepping down at the end of the season. Florida State's already got its new coach. A former Florida State player turned NBA assistant Luke Laux will take over in Tallahassee. Um, let's see. NC State just fired Kevin Keats less than a year, less than 365 days from when NC State made its shocking surprise magical run to the Final Four, not making the ACC tournament this year though. So that job's open. There's nobody in the job yet at NC State. At least as I'm recording this, I'm now talking at 12:30 on Tuesday. So if you're watching this, even later today, there could be some news there that I'm not aware of as I'm talking right now. And I don't have a future button to be able to just magically edit that. But in any case, three other jobs open. Two of them already filled. In Virginia, the first to do a search and still searching. That all said, I was told last night that the search committee that I've been reporting on, my first story on the search committee dates back to December 28th. So that's what? That's 2 months and 2 weeks ago was the first story that we wrote about the search. And that search committee at that point had been working for about 2 months and 2 weeks, as it turns out. Um, I'm told as of last night that the search committee's work is done. Basically, it's out of their hands now. The committee included a lot of guys. I'm not going to name any of them. Well, I named one in the story I wrote. Wally Walker is the head of the search committee. That's been known to me for a while. I've first reported it last night. Jerry Ratcliffe, using his own sources, wrote his own story last night and confirmed that too. So, we're all on the same page as far as that goes. Wally Walker, the former UVA legend, he led the 1976 team to that ACC tournament title, the first in school history. Played in the NBA for a few years, then got his MBA at Stanford. He worked in the business world for a while. Got back into basketball. He was the president and GM of the Seattle Supersonics for, I think it was 12 years. before the Supersonics moved to Oklahoma City, and then he's been back for a couple of years. Back in 2023, he returned to UVA as a deputy athletics director. My supposition is his role all along has been to oversee the basketball program and get them ready for this transition. Um, we'll find out after the fact if my thinking there is correct. We've known that Tony Bennett had been thinking for 3 years before he finally retired about retiring. I don't know that it doesn't make sense that Wally Walker, a guy with his pedigree running front offices, wouldn't have been brought back to say, okay, a change is coming. Tony's going to be leaving. We need to reconfigure things in the basketball office and start with a sort of a pro style GM approach. Wally Walker would be the guy if I was doing something like that and wanting to reorganize and build a new look basketball program. Wally Walker's the guy that I would have do that. So okay. Um, what I'm told by the contact that we had on the search committee is that okay, the committee, again, lots of good names that you'd be familiar with, has done its work, and it has endorsed five candidates. And you have to, you wonder why did they endorse five? Why didn't they pick one? Well, these things are fluid, okay, and we'll talk more about that. But they've given their thumbs up to five of the candidates that they have identified, vetted, made contacts with informally, I suppose, watched, scouted, um, and trying to just gauge the best way possible fit for the coach with the UVA basketball program. And they've presented that list. Wally Walker, I'm told, is the guy. Okay, so the committee vetted the list. They got the list down to five. Walker will have the final say on who he recommends to Carla Williams, the AD. And then Carla, obviously, as the AD, makes the final decision. That's just the way that works. It's hard to imagine, though, that she engaged this group 5 months ago almost to do all this work, and then she's just going to come out of left field with her own candidate. The way these things work is you get smart people to do this work for you. I know that there was when we reported on the hiring of a headhunter firm to help with the search. What I understand is that group's job was to do the formal dirty work, so to speak. Okay, so the search committee is a bunch of guys who have other jobs, other coaching jobs, scouting jobs. Um, and their task with this committee was to, I mean, I've served on nonprofit board of directors. The nonprofit board of directors, talks at the high level, and then you have a staff that does the work. That's what this Atlanta search firm sort of did for this process. So there's not two different processes here. Carla doesn't have her own process, and then this Wally Walker led process. They all go together. Okay. Um, Solid list of candidates. Let's get to the list, and I'm going to go in order of how they've been presented to me. Um, and there's a change at the top from the last time I talked about this. We've written a lot about this. And again, I said in the first segment, if you missed it, man, I just wish I had more time. I could talk more and write more. Clone myself, maybe. I was a big fan of Calvin and Hobbes. There was that great couple week strip where Calvin cloned himself. Didn't work out because the clones didn't want to work either. Um, the number one candidate though now is there's a new number one. We got in our this week in our countdown, right? I feel like Casey Kasem here. Ryan Odom is at the top of the list. Odom, 50 years old. He has a 219 and 126 record in 11 seasons as a head coach in the D1 and D2, one season in D2. His VCU team this year is 25 and 6, a net ranking of 33 going into this week's A10 tournament. I don't know that VCU needs to win the tournament. I don't think they need to win the automatic bid to get in the tournament. I think that with that 33 net ranking, they could still they could get in that large bid. If they lose in the first round to a quad 3 or a quad 4 team, that might throw them on the wrong side. But if they, don't have a bad loss in the A10 tournament and they have in season that tournament ends with a loss for them, I think they can still get in. I think they're the only team in the A. I know too much about the A10, I guess, this year. I think they're the only team in the A10 that can get an at-large bid. You know, the next team in the net is, I think, Dayton, and they're in the low 60s. You don't get a at-large with a low 60s net. So back to Odom, though. And the reason I know about the A10 this year is we've been following Brian Odom because his name has been linked to this job for a long time. He literally grew up in the UVA basketball program. His father, Dave Odom, was a beloved figure in UVA basketball circles. Um, he was an assistant on Terry Holland's staff from 1982 to 1989. And Ryan was growing up then. I mean, 82, he was 8 years old. 89, he was 15 years old. He went to elementary school, middle school, first couple of years of high school in Charlottesville. He was a ball boy for the basketball program. A lot of folks think Dave Odom should have been the guy to succeed Terry Holland. And Dave Odom might be one of those guys. Dave Odom had taken the job in 89 at Wake Forest, and then Terry stepped down in 1990, and things just didn't work out timing wise for Dave to get the job. I know the reverence that Dave has for UVA basketball, and I can tell a personal story. In 2006, I was the co-author with Patrick Height, a friend of mine, who we wrote about the history of University Hall when it was getting ready to close, and of course now, I mean, many years later, has since been torn down. Um, and we reached out to everybody we could reach out to get stories about U-Haul. And for some reason, we had trouble getting Dave Odom's contact information, and then making contact with him. And literally, unfortunately, I mean, we had already sent the book to the printer. And finally, Dave Odom sent a frantic message like, "Hey, I don't know how this happened, but you know, your contacts. I mean, I just finally got, all these times you reached out to me, and I'd love to tell stories about U-Haul. I love that place." And we just weren't able to get them in the book because, the book was already at the printer. And so, I mean, but he was so apologetic that it just didn't work out that we were able to get his thoughts. And I still feel bad about that. It's been almost 20 years. I still feel bad about, just that it didn't work out. This is 2006. I mean, we still were, it feels like we were in the dark ages still, even though we had access to the internet. We were still just finding whatever we could find. Now you can easily find people and track them down, it seems like, but back then it was a little harder. Anyway, so I mean, Dave Odom holds UVA in high esteem. I know, Scott German, our AFP colleague, has been covering a lot of VCU games this season, and chatted with Ryan after a couple of games this season, and Ryan feels the same way about UVA, just from obviously growing up in the program, literally growing up in the program. Now, on the flip side of that, he's also the guy behind the darkest 2 hours in UVA basketball history. He was the coach at UMBC when UMBC knocked us out of that tournament 16-1 upset in 2018. So wouldn't that be a story? I mean, gosh, the UMBC coach is now the UVA coach. The pros for Ryan Odom, he's won at three schools. He's got UVA basketball in his blood. The knock, and this isn't really a knock on all the coaches, so this isn't unique to Ryan, but can he recruit to a school like Virginia? That's the question for everybody, though, on this list. I reported over the weekend that Odom was the leader in the clubhouse, and from what I was told last night, that still stands. In fact, I got, unconfirmed news tip that there was a handshake deal in place. That's I hesitate to even say that. I'm certainly not going to report that on the site. But I'm mentioning it just to say, okay, I did get a tip late last night that there's something in place. There's still so much that can change though with any of these situations because Ryan Odom's name's going to come up in a lot of searches, so we'll have to see about that. But okay, that's that. I said that and got it out loud. The next candidate was the number one candidate last time in our countdown. Shaka Smart, 47 years old, 367, 178 record in 13 seasons. He has Marquette at 22-9 with a net ranking at 25. So just a few spots ahead of Ryan, actually, with his Big East team going into the Big East tournament this week. My understanding from several weeks ago was that informal contact had been made with Smart by the UVA committee. Informal contact, I want to emphasize, no poaching here or anything like that. and that there was mutual interest between the two sides. That would obviously imply that Smart had interest as well as UVA obviously having interest in him. As of a couple weeks ago, as of our last countdown, Smart was the front runner. That he isn't now, and I'm just reporting what I'm being told that he's not the front runner now. He's still very high on the list. He's one of the five here. But the fact that he's not the front runner indicates to me, this is now me reading into what I'm told, that something is suggesting to the committee he may be a harder get than they had thought a couple weeks ago. The pros for Shaka, the 2011 Final Four run at VCU, his run at Marquette. The knock, what happened to Texas? And I have answered several of people. You might, if you're watching this now and you got one of these emails, a lot of folks have brought up the Texas run to me and say, okay, is that a bad sign? My answer is everybody has failed at Texas of late. Rick Barnes got run out of town, Shaka got run out of town. Chris Beard got run out of town. This new guy, Rodney Terry, looks like he's about to get run out of town. If Texas loses, I think it's today that they play Vanderbilt. Again, I don't pay 100% attention to everything else going on in the world, but I think Vanderbilt and Texas play today in the SEC. Word is that if Texas loses either today or if they win today, lose tomorrow, and don't get an NCAA bid, Rodney Terry's gone. So, I mean, guys fail there. Texas has all the money in the world, but for some reason it just doesn't work out. So what happened at Texas with Shaka Smart? I mean, Rick Barnes left and he's been doing well at Tennessee. Chris Beard's doing well at Mississippi State. So we'll see. Now, this is just my read. I want to throw this in here. I wrote this in my column last night. All right, so I said that Wally Walker is the guy leading the search committee process, and he's going to make the final decision. And it sounds like to me he already has, and it's Ryan Odom. He's going to recommend to Carla Ryan Odom, not that he's hiring the person, but he's recommending to Carla Ryan Odom. I wonder. I mean, Carla is the one who makes the final decision, and she's got two people that are identified as the two top candidates of the five on this list. It wouldn't surprise me to see her try to override the committee. I mean, it's not like she'd be going with a wild card here. She'd be going with their 1B choice. I don't even want to call Shaka Smart number two. He was just number one 2 weeks ago. She might make Shaka Smart her top priority. Smart would be the splash hire. And ADs like to make splash hires. And there are other factors at play. I didn't write this in my column last night, but I mean, and now this is where I say I'm a political liberal, political progressive. I'm a Democrat, whatever you want to say. The Smarts, he and his wife are, they're well known for their political and philosophical and ideological stands. They would fit. They would fit differently. I don't know Ryan Odom's stances on things, but I mean, Shaka Smart. It's been made known to me by people closer to him. I don't know how close, but close, somewhat close to him. That during his time at VCU, he had a lot of admiration for UVA and its role in advancing causes in the Black community in Virginia. And if he were to get a job at Virginia's flagship program at the University of Virginia, he could view that as a stepping stone to be able to not just win basketball games, but also help affect some social change. So, I mean, we'll see. He's the number two candidate of the committee. He might be the number one candidate of the AD. We'll have to see how that plays out. The next one, TJ Otzelberger, I wrote in the column, I'll eat this one. I wrote 4 weeks ago that Otzelberger, the Iowa State coach, was not a candidate because that was after checking in, I was told that he was not a candidate. I checked in with someone on the committee, and the committee member got back and said, no, not a candidate. Now I'm being told he's not only a candidate, but he's on the list of final candidates to get a thumbs up, the final five to get a thumbs up. Otzelberger is 47 years old. He's 192 and 106 in 9 seasons as a D1 head coach. He has Iowa State at 23 and 8 with a net ranking at 9 as of this writing, or as of this writing, this talking. He took two South Dakota State teams at the NCAA tournament. He had a mediocre 2-year run at UNLV, and oddly, he still got a bump up to Iowa State, and it worked out. So, this is one where you hire a guy after They were under 500 seasons at UNLV. It's not like when I say mediocre, he only won 20 games and went to NIT. Under 500, two under 500 seasons at UNLV. And then Iowa State says, hey, we want you. And he's been the coach for 4 years, first three full seasons, NCAA tournaments. They're going to obviously make the NCAA this year, either be a 2 or 3 seed. Um, what I wrote last night was there was reportedly a huge buyout at play with him. The buyout, though, the Des Moines Register did a records request. I'm familiar with records requests. I got to do them all the time with UVA and now Virginia Tech as well. His buyout went down from 18.5 million to 4 million. It's almost like Iowa State saying, please come poach our coach. We gave him more money, but we're letting him walk for $4 million. It's almost like, again, they're saying, please come take our guy. So the buyout's not an issue. And one pro for him is his 4 Iowa State teams have all ranked in the top 10 in defensive efficiency per KenPom. He can coach defense, and we kind of know that we like that here in Virginia. Next candidate that got the seal of approval from the committee, Ben McCollum. He's my least favorite. I got some bad vibes from someone who knows of him about his abrasive style. He's also only had 1 year as a D1 head coach at Drake. He's at Drake in the Missouri Valley Conference, a one bid conference. He did win that conference's bid. He's 30-3 this year. Projects as an 11 seed in Joe Lunardi's latest bracketology. He had a 16-year run as a head coach in D2 at Northwest Missouri State. 4 national championships, 395 wins. But 1 year in D1, he's 43 years old, so a young guy. But, the talk about, maybe the culture fit might be an issue. And also, I think a bigger issue, and I just read this morning. So when I wrote this last night, I hadn't thought through to look some other things up, but he's an Iowa native. The Iowa job appears to be ready to come up. Fran McCaffrey out there looks like he's not only in the hot seat, he's about to get fired. And it's hard to imagine that Iowa will let McCollum get away. So he's got the approval from the list standpoint, but lots of things don't look like they're adding up to him coming to Virginia. Fifth and final candidate, and this is actually my favorite one. If I was the AD, this is who I'd be pushing the button on, but I'm not the AD. Bob Ritchie at Furman. Down year this year, 25-10. You might remember Furman from 2 years ago. I flew down to Orlando to watch Virginia play Furman. Virginia, the 4 seed, Furman, the 13 seed. And that day, Bob Ritchie outcoached Tony Bennett. I mean, I'm just saying, he outcoached him. He went to a 1-3-1 zone. We talked about 1-3-1 zones in the segment about the Georgia Tech game. UVA's rolled one out and see if they can use it for a couple of possessions to slow things down, right? Furman was down double digits. It was about 8 minutes to go in that game, and comes out of a timeout with a 1-3-1 zone, and Virginia could not figure it out. And he stayed with it, and it got his team back in the game, and they won on that steal at half court and a long 3 with 2 seconds to go. After the game, I remember Tony Bennett saying that obviously when you do pregame prep, you look at everything for an NCAA tournament game. You look at everything you can possibly look at, and they had reviewed, every possession that Ritchie had played that season with Furman, and he had used the 1-3-1 zone for a few possessions in the second half of a game in mid-November, and that was it. And so Tony said, it was so little that we didn't prepare anything for it. So they didn't prepare for it pregame, and then in the game, I mean, you called a timeout. There was a media timeout. Called another timeout. Just couldn't get anything together X and O's wise to beat that 1-3-1 zone, and Ritchie turned a double-digit deficit into a shocking win that knocked a really good Virginia team out of the tournament much sooner than should have happened. That's why I like this guy, and also he's 41 years old. He's 179 and 80 in 8 seasons at Furman. I imagine a hard place to recruit to. I mean, it's just hard to recruit. I don't know. I don't know how mid-major coaches do it. Honestly, I just don't know how you do it. And not just him, but anybody. I don't know how you coach. If you're Duke, you get who you want. If you're Virginia, you mostly get who you want. You kind of start going down the list here. And if you're at Furman, you get who you can get, and then you try to win with them. and then you pull an upset in the NCAA tournament. You do that's the thing. So my heart is with Bob Ritchie. He's the most Tony Bennett-like guy in the group to me, but I don't know. He's number four on this list. I mean, if something happens and either Odom or Shaka Smart is offered the job and turns it down, you know, Otzelberger is probably he'd be a really good 1C. I don't even know if I should call him the third choice. I mean, gosh, you get a guy with his chops. There's Richie is a fallback choice. Okay, I guess I'm saying this now, recording this on March 11th. It's almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time. Uh, yeah, making sure that my clock on my computer actually updated, right? From from the time change. Yeah. If you're watching this in the future and Bob Ritchie's our coach, it's okay. It'll be all right. We'll do just fine with Bob Ritchie. He's the guy that I'd like as far as all this goes. But anyway, so that's what we got. We got five guys. I think four are legit candidates. I don't know about McCollum. I don't know that he ends up with us. I don't know if we want him to end up with us. It looks like Odom's the favorite of the committee. I wonder about Shaka Smart and Carla Williams. Otzelberger is actually a player in this process. And Bob Ritchie is a guy that we might wish we'd gotten if we don't get him. So there we go. All right. Let's see. We talked earlier in the show about Georgia Tech and UVA. We'll hopefully have a Duke game to preview, but we'll see about that tomorrow. UVA Georgia Tech at noon in the ACC tournament in Charlotte. Game is on ESPN. We will have post-game coverage, and we'll see if the post-game coverage evolves also into another quick preview of UVA Duke. We'll have to just find out about that. If not, we'll have post partum depression because then we'll be turning into full search mode. And also, I mean, while we're waiting for a coach, and we will be waiting at least past Selection Sunday, if not into the weekend of the NCAA tournament, maybe even, I mean, the portal opens on March 24th, Monday, March 24th, so 2 weeks from yesterday. That's an important date to keep in mind. But yeah, we will. I'll be doing some analyses of the current roster and who should stay and who should be allowed to go, and do some of things of that nature, sort of my own exit interview kind of process stuff, and then we'll be watching the NCAA tournament with a different approach this year. We won't be for the first time in a while. We won't be watching it wondering whether UVA will be upset or make a run or whatever the case may be. We'll be watching it to see if any of these guys on this list end up in our laps. And we'll probably be risking bad karma by rooting against these guys so that we can make our hire sooner rather than later. Anyway, if you have any questions for me, any observations, please feel free to drop me an email at chris@augustafreepress.com. And I thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading, and hope everyone has a great day.